Hey everyone, it's Kristen from k.becca, and today I want to talk about the difference between sketch files and regular cut files. I've got Silhouette Studio open here, and on the left I have a birthday sentiment that was created specifically for sketching, and a good luck sentiment that's a regular cut file. Let's zoom in so we can see what's going on up close. The sketch birthday sentiment on the left here, even when super zoomed, has very thin lines that make up the design. Designs created specifically for sketch are made using very thin line weights, so when you sketch them with a pen, marker, or more recently something like the foil quill tool, you only see that single thin line when the sketching or foiling is finished. Sketch files are too thin to be cut like a regular cut file, and that's how they're meant to be. The only areas that are open in this design are the dots on the eyes, and those will be filled in as your machine is sketching unless you use a very fine point pen or sketch at a larger size. Regular cut files, on the other hand, are designed to be cut from vinyl, cardstock, or other materials, so the letters that make up a cut file sentiment, like the good luck sentiment here on the right, need to be bold and open enough for a cutting machine to cleanly cut them. You'll see plenty of white space inside each of the letters, and that white space makes up the letter forms, as opposed to the single very thin line that makes up the letter forms in a sketch file. You can use most cut files for sketching, but as I mentioned earlier, the opposite isn't true. Files created specifically for sketching are too thin to be cut, and that's by design. When you sketch using a regular cut file, the only lines that will sketch are the lines that are in red here, so basically the border of the shape. The interior of the shape will remain empty, which might actually be the look that you're going for. If you use a pen or marker with water-resistant or waterproof ink when sketching, you can watercolor the interiors of the letters to create a colorful card sentiment. Or you can sketch using a pen or marker with ink that will stand up to alcohol markers and color the shape using Copic markers or another brand of alcohol markers or even liquid alcohol ink. There are lots of creative options. But if you want your cut file to be filled when it's sketched, Silhouette Studio offers some ways to do this too. First, I'll click to select the good luck cut file. Then I'll press Ctrl+Command+C to copy it, then Ctrl+Command+V to paste the copy. I'll move that off to the right, click to select it, and then I'll go over to the far right menu and open the Sketch panel. That's the little icon toward the bottom that looks like a squiggly scribble. This panel offers several sketch edge and fill options for your cut file shape. Some of them, like this scribbly edge, look pretty cool, while others won't necessarily work with the shape that you're using. If you want to use a sketch fill, it's usually best to make a copy of the cut file by pressing Ctrl+Command+C, then pasting it in place right over top of the first cut file by pressing Ctrl+Command+F. This way, the border to your original cut file shape will still sketch. After that, you can play around with the sketch fill options to see what might work for the shape that you're using. If you want a solid sketch fill for your shape, you won't use this panel. Instead, you'll use Silhouette Studio's internal offset feature. First, I'll click to select the striped fill, then press backspace on my keyboard to delete it since we won't be using it. Next, I'll click to open the offset panel from the far right menu, and this is the little offset star icon that's near the middle of the menu. Make sure your shape is selected, then click the internal offset button in the panel, and in the distance input area, enter 0.005, so the internal offset will be 0.005 inches. Next, click the Apply button to apply the offset. After I do this, you'll see an offset line appear just inside the original border of the shape. I'll zoom in here so you can see it better. Be sure not to click off the shape or click on the artboard or do anything that will deselect the current selection at this point because we need to create our next offset from the current selection. Go back over to the offset panel, click the internal offset button, and again enter 0.005 in the distance input area. Click Apply to create the next internal offset, and you'll see another offset appear inside the first offset. We need to repeat this process as many times as it takes to fill the shape with internal offset lines. This particular shape took about 25 or so internal offsets to fill. Your shape might need more or it might need less. And make sure that you never deselect the current offset selection because that's what the next offset will be created from. After your shape is filled, you can finally deselect everything and then click and drag on the artboard to select the original shape and all of the offsets, then press Ctrl+Command+G to group them together. This will make it much easier to move the shape around if you need to. If you have digital stamp files that are black and white line art like this set, You can also use these for sketching. This set includes SVG versions and transparent PNG files too. I'll copy the Apple stamp over to our sketch file and show you how to make the SVG and the PNG into files that are sketch friendly. This is the SVG version of the digital stamp, and I'll set it so it has no fill and a red border, just like our other shapes. If you have Silhouette Studio Designer Edition and above, you can use the eyedropper tool from the left menu to click on one of the other images while the digital stamp is selected to easily change the fill and border settings to match. Sometimes with digital stamp art, the border lines are thin enough that you won't need to create any internal offset to get a good sketch result. Much of this will also depend on how thick the tip of the pen or marker that you're using is. Thin lines combined with thicker pen tips often mean that you won't need an internal offset for the sketch lines to be filled. But in this case, it's kind of borderline, so we'll create the offset. We'll go through the exact same process that we did with the Good Luck design earlier, but this time you'll only need to do a few internal offsets to fill the white areas. Sometimes SVG digital stamps, like this one, will need to be welded so all of the individual lines in the stamp are combined. To do this, open the Modify panel from the far right menu and click Weld while the image is selected. After this, we can go to the next step and create the internal offsets for the image. For the PNG version of the digital stamp, the only additional steps needed are to resize the image down if necessary and to trace the file. To trace the file, we'll go over to the far right menu and open the Trace menu, then click the Select Trace Area button and click and drag over the entire image on the artboard to select it for tracing. You may need to adjust the threshold to get a clearer trace. I adjusted mine to about 75% and then click the Trace button to apply the trace. We won't need the original digital stamp image from this point, so I'll click backspace on my keyboard while it's selected to delete it. And then I'll repeat the same process of creating internal offsets that we used for both the Good Luck file and the SVG version of the digital stamp. I'll zoom back out here and now we're ready to sketch. So I'll click the Send tab from the top right menu and I'll change the material type, action, and tool options to what I'll need for sketching. I always leave the machine settings at their defaults for this, and for sketch, it's a speed of 10, force of 18, and a single pass. Before I press send, let's head over to the machine and set things up for sketching. Okay, I've already got my cardstock on the mat and my pen holder is already in the tool holder. I've mentioned this in other videos, but I use the Chelma's Creations marker holder for the Silhouette and love it. I'll load the mat into the machine, and to sketch, I'm just using one of the inexpensive gel pens that I tested out in one of my earlier videos. I'll get out my handy-dandy popsicle stick and slide that under the tool holder. This helps you place your pen and marker at just the right height for sketching. I'll place the pen into the holder until it just barely touches the popsicle stick, and then I'll tighten the screw on the side of the holder until the pen is held firmly in place. Now I'll go over to my computer and click the Send button in Silhouette Studio to send the file to the machine for sketching. I want to mention that when you have shapes with numerous internal offsets in them, it can take a little bit more time for the machine to process the file since more offsets equals a larger file and more data to process. It usually doesn't take that much longer, but if you press send and nothing happens for a minute or two, don't worry. That extra offset data is just being processed. Okay, once the machine is finished, I'll unload the mat and remove the cardstock from it. You can see that on the birthday sentiment, my pen tip wasn't bold enough to fill the dots on the eyes. It's not a big deal, but if I had to do it again, I may have created an internal offset or two to fill those dots. You can also just take the pen and fill them in manually. Otherwise, this is a great result for the sketch file. Next is the original Good Luck cut file and the machine sketch just around the border of the shape. As I mentioned earlier, this could be the base to fill with a number of different coloring mediums depending on the type of ink that your pen or marker has. And lastly, you can see how great both the Good Luck and Apple digital stamps look with the offset sketch fills. So there are a lot of really cool things that you can do with sketch files and with regular cut files when you use them for sketching. You can find a full list of supplies used in this video in the description area below or in the area below the video if you're watching on k.becca.com. I hope that this video has been helpful in answering questions that you might have had about the difference between sketch files and regular cut files. And if you'd like to see more sketch projects, please give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching, and I hope you'll tune in again soon.